get up in the morning and put your pants on? Why do you put the pants on? I'll explain it to you someday. How do you do it? How do you get up? How do you do it? How can you want to do with what you do? They're after you. They're after you. These horrible human beings are after you all the time. How do you get up in the morning and put your pants on? Why do you put the pants on? I'll pants on. It's on. How do you get up? How do you get up in the morning and put your pants on? How do you get up in the morning? Put your pants on. Put your pants on. Why do you put the pants on? I'll explain it to you someday. How do you do it? How do you get up? How do you do it? Pants on. How do you get up in the morning and put your pants on? Why do you put the pants on? I'll explain.
Hello users, and welcome to another episodic installation of the Above It All program. Today is the Above It All program for May 31, 2024, which I guess, at least this is what I've heard this, is that it coincides with my day of birth. So if you're watching this on the day it's posted, I'm 28 years old. So, but as I record this, I'm 27. So this is the last message from a 27-year-old here, and I'm gotta take my drugs. Hold on. Take my drugs. You know, the doctors tell me not to do that, but anyway, we're doing a show today. So today is a show day. I'm going to be talking about things. I got a hat on today. It's kind of hard to have this hat on because it's like a big ass hat, and I got headphones. So like my options are like look like this, or put the flaps down, and then the headphones kind of slide around. But anyway, wearing a hat today. I like to wear hats on my show. Today we're going to be talking about, there's some bullshit, actually. I would even, and this is, I haven't really thought this through all the way, but, I would go as far as to say that it's bullfuck, even. And so, and I know, calm down for a moment. We're getting a little heated here. We're going to be talking about some bull-ass shit. Let's start off today's show a little easy, actually. Let's start a little bit easy. So this is something that's interesting. The Democratic National Committee is basically they're going to nominate Joe Biden virtually. Now, they're claiming this is about Ohio, and I don't necessarily believe that, but let's just read this article. This is from ABC. The Democratic National Committee will move to conduct virtual proceedings to certify President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic Party nominees before Ohio's August 7 ballot certification deadline and before their in-person convention beginning on August 19th. So the idea that Ohio's August 7th ballot certification deadline would be before the convention, I think is pretty funny, right? But Republicans are obviously fucking around. They're pretending like Joe Biden is some evil mafia boss or some shit because they're all fucking stupid. But the thing is, the Democrats over the last few months have been moving away from doing an in-person convention because they're afraid of protests. And so for them, they've been trying to find ways to do as much of the DNC convention, not the committee. They're trying to find as many ways as possible to do the convention in virtual ways. Now, they're still probably going to end up doing an in-person convention, but it's not going to have a lot of the most important ceremonies of the convention. Usually, again, the in-person convention is a huge marketing opportunity as well. There's a lot of like Democratic Party affiliates that want to like set up shop there, sell merchandise and all that other horse shit and all that kind of stuff. So they're still definitely going to do an in-person convention. But they want to kind of limit the important stuff going on at that convention, again, because they're very concerned with pro-Palestine protesters. And it's just, they're going to blame it all on the Republicans because it's easier to blame it all on the Republicans. But they've been kind of setting this in motion for the last couple of months. I think I covered a couple of stories over the last few months on this subject, but either way, this could take a significant moment away from Biden and the Democratic Party, as the official nomination at the convention is historically met with fanfare and celebration. But Biden will become the official nominee virtually, perhaps without the typical pomp and circumstance. The campaign said that there will be a virtual roll call and nomination of Biden and Harris. The DNC will still hold in-person ceremonial events for each process at their convention during the weeks of August 19 in Chicago. The move came moments before the Ohio Senate convened on Tuesday for a special session to address Biden's ability to appear in the state's general election ballot in November, which the GOP-led legislature is tied up with an effort to related to campaign finance, something Democrats oppose. The bill passed in the Ohio Senate on Tuesday without any Democratic support. So again, they're trying to do this bullshit in Ohio to make sure Biden's not on the ballot. That's kind of just a sidebar. That doesn't really affect too much of this. But they've been like that. Maybe you could argue that that's a straw that broke the camel's back, but they were going to do this anyway, in my opinion. But I do find it to be pretty entertaining that Democrats are going to basically shut off the in-person convention for all the important parts. But they're still going to do that for the capitalism parts, like making sure all the vendors get paid and all that kind of horse shit. But again, I mean, alternatively, they could also stop lying about the pandemic and then say we're not doing an in-person convention because of COVID or bird flu or other sorts of things going on. But of course, that would cut against their propaganda campaign that COVID magically disappeared, everybody. It's over. It's gone. Woo! It's magic. Speaking of magic, let's check this out. Farmers must kill 4.2 million chickens after bird flu hits Iowa egg farm. Now, notice the language here. They must kill 4.2 million chickens. They have to. There's no choice. Isn't that strange? I don't know. Like, isn't that a little weird? That, like, hey, some people don't consider chickens to be life forms worth caring about. But I don't know. A holocaust of chickens because of a completely preventable issue, you know, could have taken the bird flu seriously 3 months ago, 6 months ago, but you didn't, even though you had all the information at your disposal, and now you must kill 4.2 million chickens. There's no other choice. Now, this is something that's a little controversial maybe, but farmers are fucking stupid. I'm sorry. If you're a farmer, you got farmers in your family, chances are you're fucking stupid. Most farmers, especially in the United States, but abroad as well, there's a big deal with French farmers being fucking stupid about climate proposals recently. But farmers in general are stupid fucking idiots. And I've covered a lot of the U.S. farmer reaction to bird flu over the last couple of months. And so, again, you need to understand most farmers vote Republican because they're fucking stupid. They have an IQ below 30. But, hey, they produce food. So now all of a sudden we have to suck their dick every time they do stupid garbage, apparently, I guess. More than 4 million chickens in Iowa will have to be killed. Again, notice this language. After a case of the highly pathogenic bird flu was detected at a large egg farm, the state announced Tuesday. My microphone fell. Now, again, interesting, right? Like, they have to kill them. You know, could they have done something to prevent the infection? No, because prevention doesn't exist. Right? It's like you're standing in the middle of the road, the light turns green, you see the car coming toward you. So option 1, jump out of the way. Or option 2, I must be in a cast for the rest of my life, which is probably going to be like 28 minutes. Right? I just like this idea that like we just live in a world, we see everything happen ahead of time, and we do nothing about it. Like, imagine this, right? Science has invented a way to see the future, right? When it comes to, like, things like pandemics, we have seen the future. We know how this stuff is spreading. We know where it's spreading to. We know the mechanism by which it spreads. And yet, we do nothing to stop it. In the same way that climate change. We are able to see the future. We know the globe is going to speed up in heat. We know things are going to get hot as fuck. We know there's going to be more tornadoes and hurricanes and all this stuff. And yet we do nothing about it, right? And so we live in this weird world where we can see the future and we all collectively decide to do nothing about it whatsoever. Isn't that strange? It's like fucking goddamn Bardock or some shit. Like, it's like a curse, you know? Like, we're supposed to see the future and then we're powerless to change it. Like, what is this horse shit? Crews are in the process of killing 4 million chickens after the disease was found at a farm in Swee County, Iowa, making it the latest in a years-long outbreak that now is affecting dairy cattle as well. Last week, the virus was confirmed at an egg farm west of Minneapolis, Minnesota, leading to the slaughter of nearly 1.4 million chickens. Again, how about instead of mass murdering chickens, we prevent the infection? But again, farmers are fucking stupid. Now you might be saying, oh, this is the government's fault. I agree with that. But I covered this a couple of weeks ago. Farmers are refusing to allow any health inspection at their farms because of the bird flu outbreak. They're doing this. They're posting on Facebook, will not comply, bullshit garbage, when the health inspector shows up. Now, somehow, again, the farm is not immediately being shut down. I don't know if I ran a restaurant and the health inspector showed up and I beat the shit out of him like in that episode of SpongeBob. You know what would happen imminently? My restaurant would get shut down because I denied a health inspection, right? But in shithole fucking Fuckville, USA, you deny the health inspection and then you get millions of dollars on Facebook from like right-wing money, dark money groups when you say, will not comply on Facebook. So we live in Fuckville. I don't know what else to say. 92 million birds have been killed since the outbreak began in 2022, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And again, millions and millions and millions and millions of chickens. And again, like this is what I've said before, is this is going to affect the food supply because, unfortunate as it may be, people actually eat meat and people actually consume cheese, right? And so this is going to affect the food supply. Egg prices are going to go up. Meat prices are going to go up. Fast food prices are going to go up. Grocery prices, anything that has eggs in it is going to go up. And that's going to cause a cascading effect where grocery stores are realizing 90% of the stock, anything that has dairy, that can reasonably jack the prices up on. So they're just going to do it on everything else as well. Lettuce is probably going to get a jacked up price because you can't keep lettuce the same and jack everything else up, right? You got to profit all across the board. But again, no one gives a fuck. You talk to people about bird flu and they look at you funny. They're like, will not comply! Will not comply! Even though they're complying with the government's directive to pretend that diseases stopped existing in 2021 or something, right? Do you ever notice the irony? The motherfuckers who pretend to be against the government are usually the most indoctrinated by government propaganda, right? Do you ever think about that? Like, again, the right-wingers who think that the Justice Department's going after people politically are the most likely to agree with the Justice Department going after people politically when, I don't know, it's a Black Lives Matter protester, or it's the government going after people politically in the form of a cop killing a protester or something, right? Like, you ever notice this stuff? Like, most people, the more you hear, I hate the government, I hate the government, I hate the government, the more likely it is that person is secretly in the back room sucking Joe Biden's cock off and jerking off to Kamala Harris press conferences, right? It's just strange to me that we live in this world where everyone lies about everything. Everyone lies about what they believe. Everyone lies about how they act. Everyone lies at all times. Everyone's playing a character, a charade, right? People can simultaneously say, I will not comply, even though they're complying in lockstep with the government propaganda and directive campaigns, right? Like, it's just strange to me that we live in this world where people are so fucking stupid, they lie to themselves on behalf of a government to make themselves feel like they're morally superior to other people. Like, it's just strange. It's strange, right? Like, again, and we're going to be talking about COVID more in a second here, but like, it blows my mind. It really does. I just cannot, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just cannot understand how we live in this world where you are viewed as the weirdo for not wanting to have seizures or a dementia or other neurological decay at the ripe old age of 23. Again, COVID has been documented to have a net result in a loss of about 10 IQ points. If you get COVID and you get brain fog, also known as neurological disease, also known as brain disease, also known as you got holes in your brain, motherfucker, right? Again, it makes you dumber, it makes you stupider, it makes your quality of life go down, and you talk to anyone and they're like, fuck yeah, going to an anime convention is totally worth losing 10 years of my life expectancy and going demented when I'm 36, right? Yeah, I love anime. Gotta go to anime convention, gotta go to furry convention, gotta go to fucking video game convention, let's go to comic book convention, because I don't give a shit about life expectancy. I don't give a shit about people that are also involved in this hobby, this fandom. I don't give a shit about making sure that they're safe and that I'm safe so that we can continue talking about fucking Dragon Ball or fucking video games like Halo or whatever. No. All I care about is going to the convention so that we can take selfies, because we live in this fake world where you don't go to conventions to meet people or anything like that. You go to conventions to take selfies. Woo! Right? And then you post it online so people see how normal and well-adjusted you are, because otherwise you're a weirdo, you're a freak, you're a hermit, you're strange if you don't want to get a virus over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's been documented to destroy every part of your body. And again, this goes into other things like with bird flu. People had their brains broken by COVID so much so that there's another virus going on and they just don't even believe it. Farmers literally do not believe it. But yet, they're still killing 92 million chickens. They don't believe the virus is real, and yet they're killing 92 million chickens. Now, you might be saying, obviously they believe the virus is real. Do they? Because if they did, wouldn't they have done something about it 6 months ago? Now, again, you may have noticed cognitive dissonance, also known as they're dumb as shit. Farmers, Americans at large, people in general, are dumb as fuck, and they have a thing in their brain. It's literally their brain is broken because they don't know how to think properly, called cognitive dissonance, where they maintain two completely opposite positions that are completely incoherent with each other, but they maintain both are true at the same time. You ever talk to a Republican? You ever talk to anyone like that? Right? Obviously, they have no idea what the fuck's going on, but they're so, like, their convictions are so absolutely, like, firm, but, like, you ask them two separate questions on 2 separate days, their answers are completely contradictory, and yet you point that out to them and they're like, they change the subject, and then 3 days later they pretend that conversation never happened, because otherwise they'd have to do introspection. Let me take a sip here. Although bird flu has become somewhat common among poultry, why though? What? Like, what? Why? Like, and there's also a correlation common with good, or common with mild, or, likely to happen with not a big deal. Those are two different phrases. Those are two different words, but a lot of people hear common and they think it's no big deal. Like car crashes, those are common. Also a pretty fucking big deal. Its spread to cattle has added to worries about the disease. In May, a second dairy farm worker was diagnosed with bird flu. This was in a Michigan farm. And the virus was detected in both beef and milk. It has been confirmed on dairy cattle farms in 9 states. Health and agricultural officials have said the risk to the public remains low. That's what they said about the COVID-19 pandemic, and you still have will not comply motherfuckers pretending like they're against the government, even though they're propagandizing on behalf of the government's official directive. Workers exposed to infected animals are at a higher risk. The only 3 human cases confirmed in the United States include 2 dairy workers and 1 man working to slaughter infected birds on a poultry farm. There's all kinds of also cattle to or poultry to human transmission in other countries as well. So, but again, we're not going to do anything about this. Again, as I've said before, I'm more concerned with the effect this is going to have on the food supply and the general economy, because having 90 million chickens removed from the food production supply, regardless of whether or not, again, people should be or should not be eating meat, whatever, it's still going to affect food prices. And that's going to affect, in a domino effect, all the other prices of everything else, because again, most products in grocery stores are made with eggs, or at least adjacent to dairy in some fashion. So And we saw what happened at the start of the pandemic. They had an excuse to jack up prices, so they did on everything. Certain foods were a lot more abundant at the start of the pandemic, and yet they still jacked up the prices, right? So again, it's not about actual supply and demand. It's about how they can pull a fast one on you. But Americans are so fucking stupid. They think the pandemic's over, and they think, oh, yeah, getting sick 17 times a year is totally normal. And they think, oh, yeah, food costing 15 times the price it did 10 years ago is totally normal, and no one's going to do anything about it. And if you mention any of this, you are the weirdo. If you talk about capitalism in public, you're weird. If you talk about how getting sick 17 times a year is actually strange and probably not good for your health, you're weird. You're weird. But hey, everyone, let's go buy some $38 supplements because I'm sure that'll help. Anyway, let's check this out. The U.S. faces a deadly maternal mental health crisis, and it may be getting worse. Now, I've said this before on my show, and I'll say it again, but you have to really honestly be really fucking insane to want to have a child in the year 2024. Let's just be honest. You want a kid in the year 2024. Part of you has to be insane. Now, again, I know, let me just stipulate, there are good parents out there, and you know what? There are people that are good parents or will be good parents, and they also, in the sense that of the children, they deserve to have parents that are good. So I'm not going to say that every single person who has a kid is automatically evil or stupid or irrational or insane, but I am going to say at least 95% of them are stupid, irrational, and insane. And I personally believe having a child in the year 2024, unless you're like a multimillionaire, right? And that comes with its own can of worms. But really, if you are anywhere near the poverty line, having a kid is really just the dumbest thing you can possibly do. It really is. And you ever wonder why postpartum depression is on the rise? Well, guess what? Regular depression is on the rise too, right? So when you are having a child and you're at a higher risk for emotional instability and the world fucking sucks, I don't know why this just scrolled down. I don't know what the fuck. And now this, I don't want to see this. Like, I'm sorry, man. If this is your pop-up ad, it just like scrolls the screen and shows this. I don't want to see this. This is pornographic, okay? Anyway, get that out of that. Is disgusting. Anyway. No offense to pregnant bodies or whatever the fuck, but that is not my thing. I'm sorry. It's ugly and gross. But anyway. Just the idea that someone would be willing to put themselves and their children, because again, in this instance, children being born into this world honestly are victims by default. 95% of parents are abusers by default, or at the very least, I would say 95% are either neglectful in a core and fundamental way or outright abusive. Now, we can split the difference there, whatever, maybe 50-50 of that 95, whatever, but that's a whole separate conversation. But let's read this. Pregnant women and new mothers are facing a deadly mental health crisis across the United States. Mental health conditions, the leading underlying cause of pregnancy-related deaths in the country, are driving an alarming rise in maternal mortality rates, which climbed roughly 60% between 2019 and 2021. I wonder what happened between 2019 and 2021 that would result in 60% higher maternal mortality rates. Could it be a virus, perhaps, that infects the placenta and other parts of the reproductive system that causes hemorrhaging and other sorts of, very bad situations during late-stage pregnancy and birth? Could it be that? Nah, no way. No, of course not. It's definitely not the pandemic, because the pandemic isn't real. Rates of substance use, or rather, suicides and overdoses account for nearly a quarter of those deaths, according to the CDC. Rates of substance use, depression, anxiety, and other serious mental health conditions like suicidal ideation and postpartum psychosis appear to be rising among pregnant women and new moms. Now, again, so we live in a world that's increasingly more fucking insane to live in, and it's just depressing to be alive on a daily basis. You're going through one of the most stressful events of any human being's possible lifetime, and you're doing it in a society where you have no help whatsoever. If you're lucky, you have a partner who is incapable of doing everything for you, right? Because again, children as we are evolutionarily and biologically, we're not designed to be raised by two people. I know a lot of conservatives love to pretend like the two-parent mom and dad household is the gold standard, but it's not. It's a situation rife for abuse, narcissism, just straight up negligence. Two parents are not capable of raising a child by themselves. Full stop. It's impossible, right? We need to have communitarian raising of children, whether that be with school systems and so on and so forth that are actually good, because the current school system is essentially just a daycare/prison, right? But that's a whole separate subject, right? So again, just having a child in this society is inherently a very stressful experience, right? We are living in a very stressful time to be alive, right? There's a pandemic going on that most people pretend isn't real, but whether or not you pretend it's real, it's still fucking up your brain. Most people have had COVID at some point. So again, most of the population has had some amount of IQ loss. Now again, we can all argue, I know everyone loves to do, oh, IQ is racist. I agree it is racist. Until you want to fucking come up with a better gold standard of how to measure intelligence than IQ, I'm going to be using IQ when I'm talking about this. I'm sorry, it's just a fact. There have been studies that have found that a COVID infection on average can reduce your IQ from 5 to 10 points, okay? That's just science. I'm sorry if that upsets you. For whatever cope reason you want to come up with, COVID objectively makes you dumber. And guess what happens when you're dumber? You are less likely to be able to be emotionally regulated. Because guess what? When you have a lower IQ, you're more quick to be aggressive, you're more quick to become emotionally unstable, and you're more likely to bypass that middle step of trying to actually solve the crisis. You're less likely to be able to solve the crisis afterward because you have less mental faculties. Okay, and that's just how it is, right? So we live in a world where shit's getting more fucked up. People are more stratified and fucking atomized, so they have no help when raising kids. And there's a virus that's making everyone dumber and more emotionally unstable. And you wonder why, maternal mortality is going fucking through the roof. But again, we're not allowed to talk about any of this, right? So what do we come up with here? What is the prognosis here? How do we fix this problem according to The Hill? Well, let's find out. I am very concerned, said Ludmila de Faria, chair of the American Psychiatric Association's Council on Women's Mental Health. CDC recently released data showing maternal deaths dipped in 2022 and reported that 817 women died from maternal causes this year. While the decrease in deaths is a step in the right direction, physicians warn more data is needed to see if maternal mortality really is on the decline. Now, again, if we're going to be counting things like, suicide or substance use or anything like that, again, that is stuff that can show up a year later. You have a kid, 2 years later, then you kill yourself because of depression that was untreated. So again, it's hard to say anything, as they're saying, on a year-by-year basis. But let's keep going. The agency has not released detailed data on the causes of those deaths, so it remains unclear how many maternal deaths in 2022 stem from mental health conditions. It is difficult to gauge just how much maternal mental health is worsening in the U.S. given the limited data available. While suicide rates appear to be climbing among pregnant and postpartum women, for instance, Christine U. Mertier, chief medical officer at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, cautions this may be in part due to better data collection on maternal mortality rather than a true increase. She points in particular to Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, which Congress passed in 2018 as a reason for data improving. But even considering the still limited data on the subject, some research suggests maternal mental health is deteriorating. One 2020 study found suicidality, meaning either thoughts of suicide or suicide attempts, increased in the decades before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Researchers at the University of Michigan examining suicide rates among pregnant people with private health insurance between 2006 and 2017 found the number of women who thought about suicide or self-harm tripled during those years. Now, again, the world is getting more and more fucked up. People are becoming less and less likely to deal with how fucked up it is because we're getting more and more impoverished, right? And so then you throw a virus that makes everyone dumber and more unstable on top of that. Again, it's the pandemic is basically lighting the match of you soaked everything in gasoline, but hey, theoretically it hasn't burned down yet. Now getting the gas stain out of the couch, that's going to be a whole ordeal, but it hasn't burned the fucking couch, right? But again, the COVID-19 pandemic was lighting the match and tossing it into the fucking gas pile and watching the whole thing explode, right? But again, instead of dealing with the explosion, people are pretending that there was no fire. In the U.S., depression rates reached an all-time high last year, according to a Gallup survey. Isn't that interesting? Like, every year is an all-time high for the worst things imaginable. 29% of American adults admitted in the survey they have been diagnosed with illness at some point in their lives, 10 percentage points higher than 2015. Now, again, those are just diagnoses. A lot of people in this country, like, I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition. Also, I'm a fucking nutcase. I am insane. I'm depressed and anxious for sure. But I'm not going to the doctor and spending money to get someone else to tell me what I already know. And again, let's imagine, so many people also don't have the money to go to the doctor. I'm certainly not going to spend $500 fucking dollars going through a bunch of hoops just to get a doctor to tell me something I already know. And most people aren't going to be doing that either. So again, when we have 29% that are diagnosed, imagine what's not diagnosed. Holy fucking moly, okay? We are screwed. But again, if you mention any of this, you're a buzzkill, man. You're harsh in the mellow, dude. The same survey found many more women have experienced depression than men. About 36% of women reported being diagnosed with depression at some point in their lives, compared with about 20% of men. Now, again, that might just be a diagnostic differential. In a lot of cases, men are more likely to be diagnosed with certain, mood disorders than women. But also, when it comes to depression, women are way more likely to be diagnosed with depression than men, because men are more likely to figure it out themselves. Which, hey, there's nothing wrong with figuring it out yourself as long as you actually do it, right? So again, if we're talking about just diagnoses here, that is in a country that doesn't have universal health care, right, where people don't go to the doctor because they would rather spend that money on groceries, basing anything on diagnostics is a failed way to do it. I'm just saying. And that disparity is growing as women see a particularly sharp spike in depression. The rates have risen almost twice as much among women as they have among men since 2017, the survey shows. Notice, by the way, that there's no cause here. Like, let's just keep reading. Like, I'm curious, are they going to mention any cause for this, or even just any ideas for what's causing this? Let's find out. The U.S. is experiencing a mental health provider shortage, with about 47% of Americans, or 158 million people, living in a mental health workforce shortage area as of this year, according to Health Policy Research Group KFF. And that's also, I would even say, there's two metrics. There's no care whatsoever, and then there's care beneath the standard of quality that you should expect. And also, again, most people, when they go into mental health care, now again, I don't want to sound like I'm someone who hates therapy. I do, but I don't, if you're someone who is in therapy or thinking about it, make your own decision on this. But when you have an industry that is built upon the concept, right, where was the DSM started? It was started as a way to enslave people who have committed no crimes. So in the United States of America, slavery is legal as long as you are convicted of a crime. And then, they were like, well, shit, what do we do with people that we just don't like and they haven't committed any crimes? Well, that's where you have involuntary psychiatric detention, also known as slavery, unconstitutionally. It's illegal. It is illegal, right? It is unconstitutional to be enslaved without your permission when you haven't committed a crime. If you have committed a crime, it is constitutional to be enslaved. But if you have not committed a crime, you can still be enslaved, and somehow it's legal even though it's not constitutional, right? And so that's where the DSM started, as a way to make it seem logical, and yes, we're doing this for their well-being, as a way to excuse enslaving people who didn't commit any crimes. So that's the onset of the DSM. That is where mental health as a field started from, right? And again, the goal of mental health as a field is to determine whether or not you are capable of assimilating in society, and if you can't, we're going to drug you out and keep you, stuck somewhere, For example, if you are on disability, you're not allowed to have any more than like $2,000 in your bank account. Otherwise, you get your disability revoked. So you're basically trapped. You're poor forever. You're an indentured servant, essentially. In that instance, and you can't possibly ever move out of poverty, right? And that's just one way to keep you out of society. In that instance, they're just paying you to stay home and to not integrate into society because they don't want you to cause problems. And then the other way is to assimilate into society. And if you can't do one of those two things, guess what? The mental health field, if you're trying to get help, is not for you, right? The goal of therapy is to have you assimilate into a broken society. That is why I don't like therapy. If there's any therapists out there that feel offended or personally attacked, feel free to let me know, and and I'd like to see what you have to say. On top of this, many physicians who treat pregnant or postpartum women, such as primary care physicians or obstetricians, gynecologists, do not check in on mental health, despite professional organizations recommending they do so. Angelina Spicer told The Hill that when she visited her OBGYN for a 6-week postpartum checkup after her daughter was born 8 years ago, the physician just made sure she was cleared to have sex again and never asked about how handling life with the new baby. Now, that's another thing as well that stems from a lot of mental health field is, again, women are seen as property, right? So, again, a lot of, when it comes to maternal care, especially after childbirth, a lot of that started in a sense of making sure the woman behaves for the man. And that's why you see a lot of this stuff like, I don't know, it's just weird that you go to the doctor and they're just making sure you're allowed to have sex, got to pleasure the man, right? And how are you doing, lady? We don't give a fuck. Are you ready to be penetrated? If so, good. I'm going to call your husband immediately because I got him on speed dial. I'm going to let him know. All right? So, I don't know. It's a little strange. Spicer, a stand-up comedian, experienced severe anxiety and depression following her daughter's birth, but she said the conversation with her physician during the checkup centered on Spicer's weight. The doctor commented on how she looked amazing and just like she did before the baby. Again, things that are making sure that you're just ready to be a good, pleasurable piece of property for your man. I was like, why are we talking about what I look like? And why is nobody asking me why I feel like I'm drowning? She said. Now, again, still, The Hill has not posited any cause for this. Less than 20% of pregnant and postpartum women with Medicaid receive a mental health screening, according to a Policy Center for Maternal Mental Health. Screening rates are even lower for women with private insurance, the organization found. Most likely, if you have private insurance, you pay more per visit, so you're less, paradoxically, you're less likely to go for a lot of small issues. 9% of pregnant women, 11% of postpartum women with private insurance undergo mental health screening. Again, often because stuff like mental health screenings is viewed by the insurance company as not required, and so you got to pay out of pocket for that stuff in a lot of cases. Even when cases of depression are caught, many women do not receive care. A study published in 2015 found only 22% of perinatal women who screened positive for depression receive treatment. The impact this has on women who don't receive treatment and the impact on families is huge. Now, again, think about all the kids. When you are raised by a mother who is depressed all the time, you know what that does? That's abusive for the child. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that the blame is all on the mother. Like, if you're depressed and you're around your kid, it happens, right? But, when we live in a society that basically forces people to be depressed and alone, and then they raise kids, they're not going to be able to healthily mirror their children's emotional development, right? So you're going to be more likely to develop children from an early age that are going to have heightened fear response, heightened sadness response, heightened depression, heightened anxiety, and then muted responses to emotions like joy, happiness, and so on and so forth, right? So again, think of the damage to children that this does. Beyond the realm of treatment or the lack thereof, health experts also worry about the shifting landscape of reproductive laws. In the year after Dobbs v. Jackson, blah, 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 blah. We already know all this. I'm just curious, is there any reason posited for this whatsoever? And the answer is no, there's no reasoning whatsoever. Of course, because, of course, to posit a reason would mean acknowledging the COVID-19 pandemic, which is impossible to do in polite society because acknowledging the germ theory of disease? What is this? 2015? Germs aren't real anymore. Come on. Let's switch gears again back to the Democrats because I love shitting on the Democrats. Dems in full-blown freakout over Biden. One advisor to major Democratic donors keeps a running list of reasons Biden could lose. A pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democratic Party over Joe Biden's re-election prospect. Now, juxtapose this with the story I showed earlier about how they're nominating him in secret because they're afraid of protests, essentially, right? Now they're claiming Ohio's forcing our hand. They were going to do it anyway. Even among office holders and strategists who had previously expressed confidence about the coming battle with Donald Trump, all year Democrats have been on a joyless and exhausting grind through the 2024 election. But now, nearly 5 months from the election, anxiety has morphed into a palpable trepidation. according to more than a dozen party leaders and operatives, and the gap between what Democrats will say on TV or in print and what they'll text their friends has only grown as worries have surged about Biden's proposals. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about pandemic denialism, and this is a big thing with politicians, is like we live in this society where everyone is lying at all times. Everyone. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. A lie. You know, that just an example of someone lying. You know, and it being pervasive. You know, again, if your coworker is like, you know, sniffling or whatever at work, they're more likely to say like, oh, it's allergies than they have a cold. They're lying. They know they have a cold or they have COVID, right? But they're lying. They would rather lie to the coworker because of some perceived, they don't want to lose their, any status in any fashion whatsoever. They don't want to lose any positive reputation points, you know, like in fucking Grand Theft Auto or something. And so that's why we live in a society that is built upon lying. And politicians are the most expert liars. They go out there and say one thing, and then in private they say the opposite, right? That's just what they do, and that's how everyone acts. Quote, you don't want to be the guy who's on record saying we're doomed, the campaign's bad, or Biden's making mistakes. Nobody wants to be that guy. I do. I don't mind being that guy. Go fuck yourselves. The campaign fucking sucks, okay? It's a shitty campaign, jeez. But Biden, it's almost as bad as Hillary Clinton's campaign. Almost. I mean, it actually might even be worse. I don't know. We'll talk about that one later after it's over. I guess it's hard to say at this point in time, but with Biden's stubbornly poor polling and the stakes of the election are creating the freakout, he said he is somebody, some dem op. Quote, this isn't, nested quote, oh my God, Mitt Romney might become president, nested quote, it's, oh my God, the democracy might end. Now, this is the other thing about believing, right? A lot of people claim they believe the germ theory of disease. But if you believe that germs can cause disease, death, and disability, and then you go out and get all the germs you can, do you really believe in the germ theory of disease? Let me ask another question. If you believe that jumping off a cliff will kill you, and then you choose to jump off the cliff, do you really believe that jumping off the cliff would kill you? Because the only answer, the only thing that would make sense if you did believe that is if you're also suicidal. And so the same thing with the germ theory of disease. Either the average person is suicidal, which that's a whole separate conversation, or they don't believe in the germ theory of disease. And I'm going to say that that is applicable here. They do not believe democracy might end. Because if you did believe democracy might end, you know what you would do? You would do anything you possibly could to make sure Biden is not running for re-election. But they don't believe that democracy might end. They believe that there's going to be some rough and tumble and turbulence in democracy, but at the end of the day, it'll be fine, and that they'll be able to fundraise off of, the drama. That's what they believe. But they're lying. They want to make it seem like they understand what the stakes are when they really don't. They don't give a fuck about the stakes. Despite everything, Trump is running ahead of Biden in most battleground states. He raised far more money in April, and the landscape might only become worse for Democrats, with Trump's hush money trial concluding, and another this one involving the president's son, set to begin in Delaware. The concern has metastasized in recent days as Trump jaunted to some of the country's most liberal territories, including New Jersey and New York, to woo Hispanic and black voters as he boasted improbably that he would win in those areas. Now, I'm going to say something controversial. I've gotten in trouble for saying this in the past. Okay? But I'm just going to be honest with you. If you are in any minority group and you vote for Donald Trump, you are so fucking stupid. The sooner you leave this earth, it will be better for everyone else. I'm just being honest with you. I don't give a shit what minority group you're in. Unless it's the 1% richest kids in the world. That's the only minority group that makes sense to vote for Donald Trump. But if you are black and you're voting for Donald Trump, dumber than dog shit. I would even go as far as to say, if you vote for Joe Biden or someone like Hillary Clinton in a primary campaign election versus someone like Bernie Sanders, you are also really fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I don't agree. Like, with this whole idea that, like, oh, minorities are allowed to be really dumb and we can't criticize them because they're minorities. So I'm sorry. If you are a black Trump voter, you are dumber than a white Trump voter. And have you seen white Trump voters? Pretty fucking stupid, okay? While he's long lagged Biden in cash on hand, Trump's fundraising outpaced the president's by $25 million last week and included a record-setting $50.5 million haul from an event in Palm Beach, Florida, blah, blah, blah. Donors ask me on an hourly basis what I think, the advisor said, calling it so much easier to show them. So while they read it, I can pour a drink. Some Biden staffer, I skipped this part, I don't really care. The advisor added, the list of why we could win is so small, I don't even need to keep a list on my phone. So you can read the rest of this. Politico articles are usually basically like the dumping ground for people in government who want to get something out there but don't want to have their name attached to it, so they dump it in Politico. So you can read more of this. This image is really good. But like, again, they all know Biden's going to lose. Most likely Biden's going to lose. It's possible Biden wins. But I'm going to be honest with you. I have been of voting age. This will be my third election of voting age. I voted in 2016. I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. And I voted for Jill Stein in the general. And she's still running. This bitch won't give up. In 2020, I voted for Bernie in the primary. I have an IQ above 6. And I voted for Biden in the general. In both of those elections, I was pretty confident that Trump would win and that Biden would win in that order. I was very confident of that in the general. And I'm going to be honest with you, this time around, I am not confident whatsoever. I have no idea. If anything, I'm leaning toward Trump winning. But then every time you really look at Trump winning, it also looks far-fetched. And that's the other, it's a war of attrition. But both sides are trying as hard as they can to lose. So really, it goes like they're both trying to lose. And whichever one tries harder to lose is ending up going to lose here. So it's like, I don't even know. Like, I want to say shit like Biden's going to lose because of the genocide or whatever. But like, let's be honest. Let's be real. Most Americans don't care about the genocide. And I want to be going into that in a second here. Most of them don't care about the genocide. I should specify the genocide in Gaza. They didn't give a fuck about the genocide of the elderly, the sick, and the disabled when it comes to COVID-19. No one gave a fuck about that. Like, let's be honest. I'm being honest, okay? We care about genocide in political spaces, right? Broadly speaking. But also, that's not even true. Most leftists don't give a shit about the pandemic. They don't give a shit about the pandemic. Even when Israel specifically refused to allow vaccination into Gaza, the most densely populated location on planet Earth, was rife with sickness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone in Gaza has some form of debilitating long-term disease because of the pandemic, and that made them an easy target for this genocide. But you're not allowed to mention the first part, because if you do, then you're acknowledging that germs are real, and most leftists, even communists, those guys, they don't even believe germs are real, right? So broadly speaking, most people do not actually give a fuck about genocide, right? And let's be honest, let's also look at a lot of the pro-Palestine people. A lot of those guys are totally fine with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the bombing of hospitals and the genocide of civilians in Ukraine. They're totally fine with that. They're totally fine with all kinds of indiscriminate war crimes as long as it's by a government that's not the United States, right? So again, a lot of people, broadly speaking, do not give a fuck about the genocide. So I'd love to sit here and tell you the genocide is going to be why Joe Biden loses, but I don't believe that. The reason why Joe Biden loses is more likely to be because he's old than to be because of the genocides that he's maintaining. It's more likely to be from something really fucking stupid like Hunter Biden's dick being all over the internet than it is for, the economy imploding and for, fucking people dying and people being sick all the time. Right? So again, we live in fuckville, and we really need to truly understand that to really survive this era of human history, is that 95 to 99% of humans are fucking stupid. Okay? I need you. If there's anything that you learn from me in any capacity, it's that 95 to 99 and somewhere in that percent of human beings are so fucking stupid that they are suicidal don't even realize they're suicidal, and also signed up for a murder-suicide pact without telling anyone. That is 95 to 99% of humanity. And if you want to survive in this world, you're going to have to learn who is which. Are you part of the 4% or 5% or 2% of humans that don't want to kill themselves and everyone around them? Or are you one of the lemmings? Right? So, I don't know, man. It really could go either way, and that's pretty horrifying. I want to read this article on Rafah from CNN, because I find it interesting what CNN is doing when it comes to this genocide, because they started off kind of doing just, broad propaganda for the U.S. government and empire and Israel, but they've, like, very slowly, CNN has been kind of, like, telling things that are truthful, right? So let's read this article on what's going on in Rafah. U.S.-made munitions used in deadly strike on Rafah tent camp, CNN analysis shows. Here's a photo from May 26th. Munitions made in the United States were used in the deadly Israeli strike on a displacement camp in Rafah on Sunday. A CNN analysis of a video from the scene and a review by explosive weapons experts have found at least 45 people were killed and more than 200 others injured after a fire broke out following the Israeli military strike on the outskirts of Gaza's southernmost city. Most of them women and children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry and Palestinian medics. Like this, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? Now, and I'm going to say this with a lot of spite in my heart, okay? Just bear with me. There's a lot of motherfuckers that go online and they read articles about what's going on in Gaza, and they pretend to be so emotionally distraught. But you ask them about any other issue, and they don't have any emotional response. You ask them about millions of people being dead from COVID, they don't give a shit. Right? They think it's a conspiracy that millions of people died from COVID. Where did they go? The aliens took them. I don't know what the fuck people think, right? You ask people what's going on, how they feel about, like, slavery in other countries being used to manufacture things like cell phones. They don't give a shit, right? Again, this shit is emotionally heavy, okay? This is some really hard shit to read, right? But, I hate how people are focusing on these stories without broadening the implications of what they're talking about here, right? Because educating people on what's going on in Rafah and Gaza at large is really important, but also these are moments where we need to connect the fucking dots, right? Again, what was going on before October 7th, right? I mentioned it before. There is a pandemic happening. Israel refused to allow any pandemic prevention in the vaccines or in medical treatment of people that had COVID into Gaza. Why did they do that? Because they know that COVID is, I don't know, this is unpopular, a bioweapon, right? That doesn't mean it was created in a laboratory by a superhero or a supervillain meant to destroy the world, but you can use a virus as a weapon. In the same way, the motherfuckers came into the United States, or rather came into the North American continent and gave blankets full of chicken pox or smallpox to indigenous people because they understand, even before they knew about germs, they understood bioweapons, right? And Israel understood that, and they used it as a bioweapon against the Gazan population. You're not allowed to talk about that. Don't connect those dots. But what dots you are allowed to talk about are the fact that Gaza has been basically a concentration camp for 20 years. They basically had some deal where there was a fake election in like 2006, and then Israel built a wall around it and doesn't let anyone in or out. Sounds like a concentration camp to me. You're not allowed to talk about that in mainstream media. And leftist spaces, you're kind of allowed to talk about it, but don't go too far. You're not allowed to talk about the conditions of the concentration camp when it comes to disease or food quality or anything like that, because then, it might break their brain, right? And this is one of my issues with this subject, is that everyone is talking about when it comes to Gaza and the death of civilians, but they're not connecting it to other issues. Like, there's all kinds of crimes, war crimes going on in the world. And if people just love to pick and choose their pet issues, right? So that's just a little side rant. I don't know. But I've seen so many people talk about Gaza over and over and over again. And at this point, again, if you're actively engaged in the news, like I assume most people who watch my show are, you know everything about this already. You know what's going on. You know Israel is a fucking Sixth Reich or whatever, which one we're on now. You know that it's a Nazi government. You know all this stuff, right? And a lot of other media again, they're doing a great job reporting on Gaza, but we really need to kind of connect the dots here. Like, again, the U.S. is sending arms to Israel. Well, what does that mean? Why is the U.S. sending arms to Israel? Well, because Israel is our ally and we need to support them no matter what. Well, why is that the case? Oh, well, because the Holocaust happened, and then, there were people that were powerful and also Jewish in that instance who weaponized that issue to basically commit their own Holocaust in the form of going back to Israel, right? This is a long-standing dream of the Zionist project, even before Israel was created, to have a Jewish ethno-state in Israel, right? That's what they wanted. And when the Holocaust happened, there were a lot of powerful diplomats and politicians that were Zionists, right? Again, not all Jewish people are Zionists. Now, again, I will say this. If you believe in the religious, spiritual aspects of Judaism, you're fucking stupid, right? You're dumber than dog shit, and you enable the Zionists in the same way that if you believe in Jesus, you enable the evangelicals, because none of that shit is true. And when you pretend any of it is true, you're giving the most extreme tenets, your most extreme participants in that philosophy, leeway to do anything they want, essentially. Now, again, a lot of people don't like when I say that, right? But anyway, so basically, the concept of generational trauma is at play here. Now, I've seen a couple shows talk about that, but really, this concept here, where Jews had the worst atrocity in history committed against them, right? And then the only Jewish state, which is weird. Why do they keep saying that like it's a good thing? It's a Jewish state. That's fucking creepy and weird. Okay, I'm sorry. It's just creepy. Is now committing an even worse Holocaust on another group of people, right? And so again, we need to be using all sorts of news stories. In my opinion, this is how I like to do my show, is I like to use every news story as a springboard to talk about how, the world is basically falling apart. And then also, most importantly, what you can do to make sure that you don't fall to the wayside, as Dr. Fauci said about anyone who gets COVID. Oh, you got COVID and you die, or you're disabled forever? Whatever. You're not useful to the AI overlords that are coming in the next 10 years. So I'm just saying that. And what's going on here in Rafah is a tremendous disaster, and it's not going to move the needle in any fashion. I'm sorry, it really isn't, okay? Yes, there are college protests going on. That's great. That's wonderful. But is that going to change anything? It's not. It's really not. We're powerless. I need you really to understand we are powerless. Does that mean not try? No, it means try harder. It means try harder, right? If we are powerless right now, it means we got to try harder. And this is my issue here, is there's so many media reports on this subject that are just straight up lying, straight up propaganda. Like, oh, this is the most morally gray conflict in history. How many times have you heard that? You know what the most morally gray conflict in history may have been? I don't know, anything but this. This is a fucking Holocaust, Like, fucking my mom throwing a plate at me when I was fucking 6 years old. That was probably a more morally gray conflict than what's going on here, okay? I don't know, man. That shit's just fucking insane. And so, to me, right, the idea, or rather the goal of talking about stuff like this, is to, one, educate people on the facts, and then two, motivate them to make any positive progress in the right direction. And also, again, I use the philosophy of put your mask on before the kid's mask on in the airplane. Now, again, you might not know what that means because we live in a post-germ theory of disease world. But back in the day, when you went on an airplane, they would tell you, and the whole thing where the bitch does this or whatever, she does the robot or whatever, and they would tell you, in the case of an emergency, an oxygen mask drops down, put yours on first and then your kids. Because if you try to put your kids on first and you can't, you fail, right? Guess what? Now both of you are dead, right? So this is why I advocate for everyone to constantly be improving their own personal lives, right? You got to do anything you can to improve your mental health. You got to learn, constantly learn. And now, again, this is why I'm talking about Gaza in this instance, because I do feel like there's diminishing returns when you read about, Gaza over and over again, and you're not going out and protesting, and you're not using it to reassess how you look at other geopolitical issues, and you're not using it to maybe motivate yourself, I don't know, to just be a healthier person in general, to be a better person in general, so that you can help other people avoid these situations, right? So I'm just throwing out there just a little sidebar. I don't know. I'm ranting and raving here. But it's just like, Every day I read about this, every single day. I don't do a show every day anymore because goddamn, I'd kill myself at this point. But like every day I read about this, and every day I watch like people in the news just say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't necessarily have a problem with repetition, but what I have a problem with is these stories kind of being used as kind of like disaster porn for media, where like every time that there's a giant disaster in Rafah or in Gaza in general, right, you see all the YouTube channels go breaking, live report, ad revenue instantly or whatever, and they don't really tell you anything actionable or anything like that. And maybe I'm expecting too much from news channels, but maybe that's true. But I just expect people that proclaim to be leftists to really be trying to build an international leftist movement, and that ultimately is not the case here. And that's the only thing that really is going to be able to stop this. I got news for you. The only way that this genocide is going to end is with every single Palestinian dead in a body bag. That is the only way this is going to end, unless we do something major about it. And we're not going to do something major about it. We're not, because no one gives a fuck. So we're all just going to read in the news, 45 people died for no reason in Rafah because Zionists 100 years ago believed in their sky daddy and wanted to commit a forever Holocaust because someone committed a Holocaust against their cousin or whatever. Israel's escalating assault in Rafah, where some 1.3 million Palestinians were taking shelter before Israel began its operation there, has drawn swift international condemnations with the UN agencies. Again, none of this means anything. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, we condemn the IDF. Really? Oh, wow. Next? Like, what are you going to do now? And these are showing, like, obviously we know U.S.-made munitions were used in Rafah, but this is what they're trying to prove is that, here's the serial number or whatever the fuck. U.S. President Joe Biden is not altering his policy toward Israel, suggesting the deadly Rafah strike had not yet crossed a red line that would force changes in American support. Despite him saying in a CNN interview earlier this month he wouldn't allow certain U.S. weapons to be used in a major offensive in Rafah. So now what they're saying is, oh, no, we meant a ground invasion. I want to play this video. This is a video here I found on Twitter. I think this is John Kirby. He's a total freak, by the way. And she is not having a good time, if you can tell. Speaking on behalf of the White House and explaining basically how they feel about this Rafah strike.
So how does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see.
So, notice, right, that Kirby is like, we don't want to see a ground invasion. Now that's the big buzzword. Ground invasion. In what way is a ground invasion honestly worse than carpet bombing the fucking babies from the sky? Let's be honest here. Drone striking babies from the sky is somehow like a lesser evil than a ground invasion? I would argue it's worse. I would argue it's way worse. Because, hear me out, with a ground invasion, theoretically, Palestinians could fight back and kill a couple IDF guys. As I like to call them, Nazis. Theoretically, right? So, with carpet bombing them from the sky, they have no option to fight back. So I'm just saying, this idea that the red line is a ground invasion, like what the fuck? And if, the audio on the reporter's mic is really bad because it always is. It's 2024 and we still haven't figured out like wireless microphones apparently. But he's asking, how many charred corpses does Biden need to see before doing anything about this? And the answer, 2 million. And changed. I think it's 2.3 million charred bodies is what he needs to see.
There's a change in policy.
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken. And I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number.
He took offense at the question. Now keep in mind, this is the genocide architect of the United States, essentially. He is the one in charge of the genocide policy in the United States. This is the guy that's going on the TV stations and the White House press briefings to talk about why the genocide is good, actually. And he's going to tell you, the viewer, that that he's so dearly offended by being asked how many charred corpses he's got to see. I just like, and again, this is what we're up against here. Like when it cut, like now I'm talking to the leftist again. This is what we're up against. We're up against ruthless, brazen, money-backed, genocidal Nazis. Right? That's the fucking threat. A college protest is not going to do shit against this. Now, that doesn't mean not to protest, but it means we need to do yes and protest, and then take your protest from the college campus to the fucking city hall and protest the official city council on why they're not divesting from Israel, right? Take that protest from city hall and then march on motherfucking Washington and occupy Washington, D.C. for like fucking months until the fucking genocide stops, right? So like this is my issue here, is that every time there's a crisis, leftist media tells you to do the same fucking thing over and over and over again. Always do step one. Crisis happens, do step one. Then the crisis, everyone forgets about it. Next crisis happens, do step one again. What? Shouldn't we just move on to step? No. Right. So again, I'm going to play the rest of the video, but I'm trying to have a different, I'm trying to cover Gaza in a way that a lot of other outlets aren't doing. So I'm putting emphasis on a lot of other stuff. That's not to take away emphasis on the Holocaust happening in Gaza, but it's to provide supplementary information, because I know everyone watching this show is already keeping up to date with Gaza from other issues, whether they're reading, publications in Gaza or stuff like that, or they're watching other leftist shows. Gaza is the thing that most people are talking about right now, so I'm trying to add a different angle to it. So again, I just want to be clear about that.
Of civilian casualties. And this is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend as a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating.
Yeah, Ed, that's the reporter's name. How dare you ask me that fucking question? I'll have you know, I called a guy in Israel on the phone. We were talking about fucking goddamn flowers and pancakes. And then I asked him, hey, what's the deal with these charred corpses? And he's like, I don't know. And then I hung up the phone. So yeah, fuck you, Ed. I asked an Israeli about it. Yeah.
Investigating it. So let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
But the president doesn't have like a personal limit to this?
The president has been very clear and very direct.
But I know. Obviously they're lying. Everything they say is a lie. But like, it's just like, and that's the thing I need you to really understand, is the brazenness. This is what we're up against here.
About what our expectations are for Israeli operations in Rafah specifically, but in Gaza writ large. We don't support, we won't support a major ground operation in Rafah. And we've, again, been very consistent on that. And the president said.
Now notice, major ground operation, right? So Israel is going to invade Rafah on the ground. And then John Kirby is going to go up there and say, oh, well, it's a minor ground invasion. That doesn't cross the red line. It's a minor ground invasion, right? They're always moving the goalposts. And again, to go back to the CNN article, because honestly, the rest of that's just garbage. Let's see what else we got here. CNN geolocated videos showing tents and flames in the aftermath of the strike on the camp for internally displaced people known as Kuwait Peace Camp 1. And video shared on social media, which CNN geolocated to the same scene by matching details, including the camp's entrance sign and the tiles on the ground. The tail of a U.S.-made GBU-39 small diameter bomb is visible, according to 4 explosive weapons experts who reviewed the video for CNN. Now, again, this is what the article's about, but honestly, again, who gives a fuck what bombs are blowing up the babies? Honestly. Now, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't know this information, but what I'm saying is, like, why the fuck are we blowing up babies with bombs in the first place? Right? But yeah, so you can read the rest of this if you want. But the situation in Rafah is horrible. It's really bad. It's just really fucking bad. I don't know what else to tell you. Other than keep in mind, keep the Palestinian people in your memory going forward. When you hear about how governments are acting when it comes to other populations or your population, keep in mind that the entire world watched a genocide happen on TV for a year or a year and a half, however long it takes, to completion, and no one did anything about it? Like, say what you will about the Nazis in Germany in the 1940s, but they didn't broadcast their Holocaust on TV. You know? Like, say what you will about their fucked up shit, but they didn't broadcast the gas chambers on live television. And that's essentially what Israel is doing. The Nazis in Israel are broadcasting this Holocaust on live television. And we're all doing nothing about it. And to be honest with you, we can't do anything about it. Let's be honest. The systems don't exist for us to do anything about it. If we had, over the course of, let's say, the last 5 to 10 years, or 20, or 30, or 100, or whatever, had amassed a large-scale peace movement that had political power, financial and economic power, and alignment on issues, then maybe, theoretically, we could have done something about this. But we can't. This is just another genocide people are going to have to watch. And hell, if we're lucky, in 5 years, everyone will pretend it never happened. Because that's what happened with every other fucking mass crisis that this country deals with, that this world deals with. Every crisis. The recession, depression in 2008, that never happened. What are you talking about? What? Fucking... I just... When you see the shit coming out of here, man, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. And the only way against it is to build institutions that are powerful and that have good purposes. And that does not mean build an institution that you put your name on and you raise money to do one specific thing that really ultimately doesn't matter too much. Like, if we all, like, got together and said, fuck you, to the people doing all this stuff, it could end. But we're not going to do that because, again, and this goes back to what I was saying before, most people are fucking stupid. Most people are fucking stupid. And even worse so, they're content being stupid. I know people, right? Hey, what do you think about this thing in Gaza going on? What's that? What do you think about what's happening with Israel? Oh, I don't care. Do you have any opinion whatsoever? Nah, doesn't affect me. Don't care. And as long as those people exist, and we can make an argument that those people might always exist. But really, when you think about it, the goal should be to eradicate that group of people. Not via genocide, of course, but via information. The idea that there is someone out there who sincerely doesn't know what's going on in Gaza? Come on now. That should not be possible. And that should be like one of the very early steps that we do in amassing a global left-wing infrastructure of any kind. Because until we actually have any amount of global uniting here, we're just going to be repeating step one over and over and over again. You know, say what you will about movements in the 1960s. The Black Panthers got to like step 3 or 4 of building a better world before they fucking got their shit rocked by the FBI and the CIA. And we're still here like 80, 70 years later doing step 1 over and over and over again. In 2016, when Trump got elected, what did everyone do? They did step 1. They protested. Then they went home. Great. Black Lives Matter protests. What was that? Step 1, maybe verging into step 2. You know, a little bit of like, you know, destroying some institutions of violence. But maybe step 1, maybe like they started step 2 and then everyone went home. Gave up. The COVID pandemic, no one did anything about the COVID pandemic. Millions of people dead. Dozens of millions of people permanently disabled. No one did a shit, didn't even do step 1. Right? And the genocide in Gaza, we're doing step 1 again. Again. We're just, going to protest a little bit. Get that selfie so that everyone knows I protested 15 years ago. You know, you got to take the picture of yourself at the protest to use in your political ads in 10 years. And we're just going to keep doing step 1 every crisis. You know, I'm 28 as of today. Also known as 2 days from now because I'm recording this on Wednesday. And I've seen the same thing happen over and over and over and over and over and over again. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. right? As long as I've been politically aware of the world around me, I've seen people do step one, step one, step one, step one. I didn't like how they did it. I'm going to start over. I didn't like how they did it. I'm going to start over. I didn't like how they did it. I'm going to start over. So I don't know, man. I think we're fucked. I really do. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but I don't think a protest is going to stop anything. I think the only way that this genocide is going to end is with 2.3 million Gazans dead. And also, they're probably going to go onto the West Bank and other stuff like that. I mean, they already are, but I mean, full scale. After all the Gazans are dead, they're just going to move all the tanks and drone strikes to the West Bank and stuff like that. So, there is no way to stop it whatsoever. Like, we don't have enough time, even. Let's imagine we did some, like, mass movement or whatever. That's why we should have been doing that over the last 100 years. But instead, no one gives a fuck. No one gives a fuck about anything. And the culture of fucking malicious negligence has taken hold in our society. So, we're fucked. I hate to give you a dose of negativity on my birthday, but anyway. That's how I feel about stuff. You know, yeah, anyway. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to level them at me. You know, send them my way. Your comments, your questions. Rather, your questions or your comments. Or possibly even concerns. Are you concerned with the quality of this program? Let me know. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll see you next week.